Hello and welcome to the Value of Testing podcast. My name is Randy Rice. I'm your host of the podcast. And today I'm excited to welcome a special guest we have with us, Ruslan Desyatnikov. I had it great in the rehearsal, okay, and I kind of flubbed it there, so sorry about that, Ruslan, but good to have you with us. Just as a point of introduction, he brings 28 years of expertise in QA, QC, process improvement, and software testing. He's the founder and CEO of QA Mentor, who is a global software testing company, actually an award-winning software testing company. And he's worked with a lot of Fortune 500 companies to transform their testing. He's also the inventor of the Human Intelligence Software Testing, also known as Hist. It combines human judgment, critical thinking, and risk-based analysis with modern automation and AI, things that we're all very much concerned about these days. And he and I think, share a lot of territory there when it comes to the human factors in testing. So, Ruslan, I would invite you. Do you have any other things that you'd like to say about yourself as a way of introduction?
First of all, hi everyone. Thank you so much, Randy, for inviting me to the show. I really appreciate it. As always, I'm excited to speak with veterans of QA who's seeing and been there for a while and pretty much seeing it all, and have discussions and brainstorm various of different topics. You pretty much covered my sort of expertise. I've been around for the last 28 years, started as a junior tester, played various of different roles, wear multiple different hats until I decided to, start entrepreneurship path, take it, to the business level, and started QA Mentor 15 years ago. And since that time, I continue to, try to grow QA Mentor, try to help many different organizations around the world to mature their QA processes, adopt best practices, implement various of different strategies around quality assurance, software testing, quality control domains, and very happy to be here and share knowledge, share lessons learned, mistakes. I always open, to discuss candidly, honestly, everything what happened in my career. The positive things, the negative things. As much as I want to share some of the mistakes and lessons learned, will prevent some of the younger generation, some of the future entrepreneurs or QA, professionals, not to make same costly mistakes, which I did multiple times and learn from it. So thanks again, Randy.
Sure thing. Well, one of my Randyisms actually is that failure is not an option. For testers, it's an objective. So we need to learn how to embrace failures, and let me tell you, I've had my share of them too. One of the things I want to start out with is, obviously we're in a situation right now in terms of technology and even society, how things are changing at such a really, really quick pace, and AI has just exploded and transformed. Even, I think back to about 6 months ago, okay, I had lunch with a couple of friends, and one of these guys, I'm not going to name him, but he was instrumental in working on a deal with NVIDIA. He was as closely wired into AI as anyone that I've known. And his advice to me and his take on it was, well, AI is just an assistant. It's a tool. And, I've kind of been working with that perspective until fairly recently. And I've just started to see this massive transition of agentic AI, and where, it's even become autonomous. So kind of in this world of where everything's rapidly increasing, what's your take on, how do testers keep up? How do we remain relevant? How do we bring the value into organizations? Maybe for some organizations are just automatically assuming that AI is going to take care of everything, and how do we how are we going to deal with this?
It's a great question, and we started looking into AI probably around 14 to 12 months ago, where we started basically building the expertise around in AI-enabled automation tools and solutions. So the idea there was that we wanted to help to solve one of the biggest problems which every client and customer wants to solve, which is how to do testing quicker and faster, how to do testing cheaper, and how to assure that by doing it cheaper and faster, quality will still be there without any compromises. And that's where, when AI sort of hit the industry, right, we start looking into various of different solutions which helps you to be more effective and efficient as part of the software development lifecycle. So we start looking, and the idea was to build that ecosystem throughout software development lifecycle, started from requirements gathering phase, which means our involvement and requirements gathering phase is crucial. I was the one for many, many years advocating the notion of static testing and how important static testing is, how important is verification, validations of the requirements up front, where many companies didn't take this seriously and thought that it's just a waste of time and money. So we were looking for a solution, because several solutions hit the market where tools enable you to identify gaps and issues and problems in the requirements itself, in the user stories, in the functional requirements, in the user requirements, in the functional specifications, use cases. We previously did this manually with the eyes and human brains, and we wanted to see whether AI can actually identify more gaps than the humans. And we started exploring a number of different tools and solutions. So we did a very good analysis on that part, and we identify a very, very interesting tool, which we're leveraging right now across a number of projects for our clients and customers. The tool called Spec2Test. And we'll talk a little bit more about this tool later, because I personally found this tool very, very useful across software development lifecycle. So this tool allows to identify gaps, issues, problems within the requirements itself, identify where requirements needs additional updates, where the missing acceptance criteria are, where undeclared field validation rules are, and it makes requirements much better and much more stronger, because that's the whole purpose, the whole idea. Because the more better requirements are, the better comprehensive test cases will be, because we can test based on fully defined requirements with acceptance criteria. So just to get back, not to go into the different directions from your question, what I feel and what I think is there's two verticals where AI actually steps in and where testers are actually communicating with AI. One is as a helping hand to be more effective, be more efficient, speed up test design, test preparation, impact analysis, risk identification, as well as manual test case generation, automation scripts, conversion from the manual test cases, execution part, scripted automation generation based on the different programming languages. So this is all enablement to be more effective and efficient. The other side of it, how testers who typically traditionally tested, applications, the basic applications, how they're going to test and evaluate and audit AI, because it's not deterministic, it's probabilistic, right? So there is no acceptance criteria per se, there is no expected results, and everything is constantly changes, right? So this is a completely different ball game. So there's two verticals again. One is towards orientations on the automation with AI helping you to be more effective and efficient. And another one is actually evaluating AI through human intelligence, as well as the various of other AI tools, which helps you to evaluate AI properly, identify gaps and issues relating to the hallucination, relating to the biases of the AI, fabrication, security aspects, and other things. So that's what we've been doing for the last 12 to 14 months, identifying various of different tools and solutions which will arm us to be more effective and efficient, and at the same time also helped us to evaluate and test AI the proper way. Based on all of this experience, I personally determined that evaluating AI, testing AI, just using human intelligence will practically be impossible because there's a lot of permutations and combinations, and this you can only achieve through specific AI evaluation tools which will generate and mimic all of these types of conditions, because AI fails and get worse with time. It's like performance testing. You might hit something immediately within 5 minutes, everything looks good and fine, but when you start doing stability test, when you will increase the load and you stay, for 3 hours at that levels, you start seeing memory leaks and some other potential problems, right? The same goes with AI. AI, through several prompts, it might behave and respond perfectly fine, but later on, as you go in, it starts hallucinating. So you never know, it's going to start hallucinating on prompt number 5 or prompt number 1347, right? So you need to get to that point, and to get to that point manually, it's absolutely impossible. Now, I said before that testing typical traditional applications without automation, it's possible, and we've been able to deliver perfect, successful applications to production without a single line of automation scripting before. For AI, it might become very, very challenging. You still can test through the human intelligence strategies and methodologies which we built, but the really specific audit tools will scale and will achieve much quicker and faster turnaround time. And that's where I say, without truly automation tools specifically for AI evaluation, a typical, tester will not be able to achieve a really good results. It's going to be very, very slow test. So this is where I said it must be leverage combinations of both, human intelligence and the tool set altogether. So that's, just in a nutshell, a little bit to, expand on your question to what I see, what we see, what is kind of a division between the, assistant AI tools for productivity, as well as the tools to truly test and evaluate AI from all the angles, from all the perspectives.
Yeah, I think that some of the fundamental principles of automation are changing. One that I can definitely think of is that, my guideline over the years has been, before I can automate something, I need to reliably be able to repeat it. It's kind of the robotic view of automation. And I think we're going to be getting into, if not already there, a time where automation is going to have to be adaptable, perhaps even use AI itself to keep up. And I totally agree with you. Trying to keep up with it manually can be very challenging, especially when you're trying to do functional testing and that kind of thing. I've got a whole stack of notes here, and one of the things that I have in my little stack is Anthropic launching a code review tool. This just was released maybe a day or two ago, where it's a new tool that's inside Claude Code, and it looks on things like logical errors and things like that. But here's the catch: they charge like $15 to $25 per review on average. And so the idea here is that you can integrate it with other Claude products, and that kind of thing. But people are going to have to pony up for that. Now, in the grand scheme of things, the cost of a defect. The last time I checked, the average cost of a defect in the U.S. it was like $16,000. $25. You're probably going to catch a lot of defects for that. So it'd pay for itself. And I'm thinking that maybe companies will, now that it's part of AI, pony up and maybe pay for that. So one of the things that concerns me too is, we hear of these massive layoffs of entire, like 4,000 people from Block here recently, and the numbers are staggering. We had a local software company have a massive layoff of almost 500 testers, and it didn't seem like any kind of thought was given to their relative skill sets, or maybe they were upskilling, like we're telling everyone to do, learning about automation, learning about AI. I have a feeling some of that's going to come back, but I'm still telling testers to upskill and to try to get as familiar as they can with AI, use it, understand it, apply it, in their testing world, but yet also give your human intelligence a perspective in there as well. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. It's very interesting that you brought this up, that, code reviews tool. Throughout many years, code reviews tools, for some reason, developers were afraid of. I mean, there was static code analysis, dynamic code analysis tools, and every time when you run the scan to identify technical depths, you got the report with thousands of violations. And then, if you show this report to CTO or CIO, they said, oh my God, what's happening here? Address all of them. And developers say, oh my God, I cannot address all of the thousands of violations, right? So they were scared to run and touch and open sort of the hood just to see, oh my God, the engine is pretty old or something is there. So I was always curious to understand why their tools been there for many, many years and nobody's really running and using them, until the time I figure out that they simply scared to run and see how much technical depth is there every time at the code levels. And if they're going to start addressing, they will never go live with any of the applications. And that's why those tools is not popular anymore. Now, with AI, it gets even more interesting because it's actually identify problems and issues right now at the code level. And also there's some tools where now it will tell you, if you have your manual test cases created, it will tell you based on the code changes and evaluations of those code changes, potentially what test cases will fail or pass without even running them. So just imagine the code is not even delivered or deployed to the test environment. You just connect your AI tool to the GitHub repository where the code is stored, right? And then it evaluates all of these new code changes and it tells and predicts what are the test cases which will fail, what are the test cases which will pass. I think that impact analysis, very, very helpful. Now, we evaluated a number of those tools. They're not working perfectly, but they definitely giving you some insights to say, well, this area has a lot of problems. So that will give me an insight that we need to structure our regression testing around this particular area or this particular module and execute this, more than the other area, which has no problems and no issues. And we don't need to waste time to run this manually if you don't have any automation scripts in place, right? So that's definitely very, very interesting and very helpful. But to your other point on human intelligence, right? This is where human intelligence step in. This is where human in the loop should come into the picture, because you cannot blindly rely on AI outputs at all. You always need to check, double check, triple check. It definitely will help you out to progress quick and fast, but you gotta verify and validate. And in order to verify and validate, you're not just validating just without, again, using your brain, saying, okay, I think it looks good. You look, for example, I'll give you an example. So any of the manual generation test cases tools through AI, you can use many of those nowadays, right? It can generate a lot of test cases, but there's a lot of garbage test cases which totally irrelevant, which get getting generated. There's always many test cases getting generated, thousands of test cases generated where 90% of them are unrelated at all, right? So somebody really need to dig into this and really understand whether those test cases are appropriately created and covering the necessary areas, or they're absolutely just a nice number, and more doesn't mean better always, right? And that's where humans needs to step in and check, and that's for everything across the board. There is nothing where I in my day-to-day activity blindly rely on AI as the output, taking it for granted, and just blindly say, okay, I got it here, and I pass this to somebody else or give this to somebody else. No, I'm analyzing, I'm looking, I'm reviewing, I'm rejecting, in case I'm interacting with AI, until I feel 100% confident that this is what my expectations are. And this is at the level, if I would design, if I would build, if I would create, I would, definitely will deliver this output. That's why I don't understand where some of the decision makers think that AI can substitute coding and start code without the error, substitute testing, will start test and find issues without testers, and that's no need to have any human experts in the loop, right? Because it's not just a human. Human needs to have brains and intelligence, right? Just putting a human there, which is not experienced, and looking at the output and just saying, I think it's okay, I think it's all right, that's not. So you need to have a expert with experience, right, who can qualify anything which has to do with AI output and then determine whether it's correct or not. So that's why you got to be there, all the time.
Absolutely. A great example of what you're talking about there is back, I think, on March 5th. I posted on this on LinkedIn, by the way, about Amazon has an AI coding agent called Kiro. They gave that autonomous power to a production environment to fix an issue. And what it did was it deleted the entire environment, over 300 systems. It actually just wiped out. It also wiped out 6.3 million orders for Amazon in that incident. And their response to that, Amazon's response was, we're going to put 2 human reviewers on all changes to its 335 highest revenue systems. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds a little thin to me.
True. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how is it possible, humanly possible, right, to be able to watch all of this. I mean, it's better than nothing, but I completely agree with you. It doesn't look right proportionally that 2 humans can handle this type of work and activities, right?
Yeah, and so, one of the things, and I've been harping on this for at least 15 years now, that testers need to become known for something other than finding defects. Now, of course, that's why we're told we're hired as testers is, to find all the defects or find as many as we can before something goes to production. But as long as we're known as bug finders, then we get associated with the bugs, and there's going to be something that comes along like AI that can find bugs faster, maybe even better. So I've been encouraging testers to make the shift to being information providers, talking about risk, elevating the discussion. What's your take on that? And how do testers make that transition?
Absolutely. Again, unfortunately, in some cases, as you mentioned, we associated with the defect findings, and people call us, defect finders, and that's our designation. But this is not our full job, and this is not what our job's supposed to do, just to find defects and problems, right? This is one of our responsibilities, but that's probably 30% of our job really is, right? And you're absolutely correct that, you cannot compete with machines in terms of the speed, right? The speed of identification from the machine versus the human, we will never beat, right? But we have to showcase the other areas, and the most important areas where I think AI will not beat us is the ability to do that judgment calls, do that human usability aspects of the application. The AI will not be able to feel the application, right? Only human will be able to see whether certain things within the workflow is confusing or not, whether it's user-friendly or not. You would not believe how many owners of the companies called us and they said, Ruslan, we went live 3 months ago, 4 months ago. We spent millions of dollars building the platform. Our clients registering, but nobody buys anything. Clients are not getting converted. And the question from their side, why is it happening, right? And they hired different people to figure this out. And we were able to figure things out. We were able to actually wear the user hat, register, and try to analyze and understand where the problems are, where the users get distracted or confused, or something distract a user that the user said, well, this application is not smart. I'm not getting it. This is not really, this is super confusing. Let me just leave and go to my competitor. We identify those gaps. We identify those problems. AI will never identify the problems. AI can spot the defect. AI can spot, the incorrect coding, scripting, but AI will never feel what the feelings are at the user level. And that's where the human tester, aspect will always be there. Accessibility testing, also, there's scanners, there's tools which allows you to identify certain things, but you still need to put yourself as that disabled, impaired user and be able to see where the problems are, where the issues are, right? So again, there's areas where, number one, AI will not be able to compete with the humans, but I still feel that AI should be an assistant to the human strategy and how to attack and create the proper test plan, proper test strategy to assure that the application is not only defect-free. This is one part, but the key here is to assure that the application will be successful out there, that the users wants to go and use that application. And that application will serve the purpose. That application will solve business problems. This application will be so user-friendly that people will not scratch their head and say, I'm not stupid. The application is stupid because I'm smart. If I cannot get what this functionality is all about, there got to be something about this application, right? I'm smart. And they said, and they leave, right? That's kind of the idea. This is what the testers really can assure. And, of course, AI, again, can build scripts and automation scripts. But if AI builds the scripts based on limited, defined strategy, you're going to miss problems. You're going to miss things, right? So I always advocating the proper strategy, the disciplined test planning. I still can get people who are claiming and screaming that you don't need test cases. Don't worry, just start testing, figure out things on the fly, do the just exploratory testing and you'll be fine. You're not going to be fine. Yeah, you're going to find defects quicker than somebody who is planning and analyzing requirements and building the test cases, coming up with the negative scenarios, all the permutations, variations. Yeah, you're going to start finding issues quicker and faster than that person. But at the end, we want to make sure that the business is protected. We're not missing defects. We're not missing risks. Those risks not costing millions of dollars, right, to the client. Without the test cases, without the discipline, without the documented, I call it navigation, right? I mean, if you know the direction, you're going to get lost. You know, one time you got to look at the navigation, second time, and then third time you will understand that path, right? But initially, you need to follow the steps, you need to follow the directions. Otherwise, you're going to miss things, you're going to miss exits, right? You're going to miss turns, and it will take you longer at the end of the day. So I'm a big advocate of proper planning, disciplined approach. Obviously, I'm not for bureaucracy. Millions of papers and paperwork. No, it's got to be a reasonable approach to this. But I cannot accept the fact that forget about the test cases. Let's just test. Let's just, achieve this and that's it. And then what do you leave behind, right? What you will leave tomorrow or you're going to find something else. What are you leaving behind yourself? Company invested money into you. And then what the company is left with. The same goes for legacy platforms where developers coded, never documented anything, inside the code as well, no comments whatsoever. They left, and then nobody can figure out what it is. There is nothing, and you're spending time and hiring experts to figure out what it is. Same goes with the testing, right? I mean, you cannot just hide everything here without putting this into the documentation. So again, I a little bit upset at people who are, screaming that test cases, test scenarios, unnecessary. You don't need this metrics. You don't need this. How you operate in darkness. Without the metrics. How do you know whether you're doing things the proper way? How do you know you improving or you going backwards if you're not measuring yourself, right? So there's a lot of things out there, unfortunately, within our own testing community, which contradicts with a lot of basic standard common sense, and we ourselves damaging and creating that damage for the QA industry, unfortunately. The message to all the testers out there is you cannot position yourself just as a defect, identifier, people who just look for defects, right? You have to position as a quality advocate, as a process advocate, as the true, quality owners to make sure that application is not only defect free, but it's provides everything what the user expects. It's user-friendly from the usability perspective, from the compliance and security perspective, from the performance perspective, from the accessibility perspective, right? From all of those angles, you have to position that you understand all of these areas which needs to be in a good shape before you invite clients to take a look at the platform, right?
Yeah, I love that. By the way, I'm one to never miss a chance for some shameless promotion here. But you were mentioning legacy systems. I've got a book out on Amazon called Testing Dirty Systems that I co-wrote with Bill Perry, and it's still out there. Yeah, it's a little bit out of date, but we actually take a financial system as a case study throughout the book, and it's a fairly hefty book. It's like 500 pages, but it gives guidance on, if you're faced with testing those kind of legacy systems. But one other thing you mentioned that really put a light bulb in my head that went off was the case of the people that, they were getting confused and placing orders, customers were leaving. You might not count the thing behind that as a hard defect, that you might say, well, it's working functionally. correct or correctly. But just think about how much money gets lost when a customer leaves. And I think the research shows that well over half of those customers just never come back.
Yeah.
Yeah, that they're gone. And so, if you look at the combination effect, where the cost will just keep rising and rising, to have someone to look at that would have extreme value. I'm on this Facebook group with a bunch of old mainframe programmers, and so that's where I go back to. I go back to the late 70s, early 80s, coding COBOL at banks and insurance companies, and the conversation kind of got funny. Because someone put out there that they tried to do something on a website and it just didn't work, and no one does testing anymore, and testing isn't nearly like it was in the 70s. And I just laughed because, man, I was working at a bank in the early 80s, making changes to the checking account system. And we didn't even have a test environment. We didn't test anything. We just made the change and put it in, and that was the joke. We said it was like our nuclear arsenal. We don't know for sure if it works until we press the button. But anyway, and I totally agree with your thoughts on documentation. I think sometimes we forget that there are many contexts to how tests may be used, and consider the handoff, where you design some tests and you need to hand them off to another group, like maybe a set of users or someone like that. And I mean, personally, I'm an in the trenches tester. I do this myself from time to time, and I don't like working in a new world every day. I don't like having to research expected results after I see, an outcome. I think that's some of the big value of having that, and this is going to kind of transition now into a point of the discussion where one of my other Randyisms is that there are two places you never want to be: in the newspapers or on the TV, and in the courtroom. And when I start thinking about liability, and when lawsuits over software happen, a lot of it starts looking at testing. A lot of it, looks at the practices around testing. And when someone can wave a copy of the IEEE standard, 29119, that shows this is the international standard for software testing, and you're sitting there with, well, we have a great team of exploratory testers. It is kind of hard to make that case. But I want to get back to your prediction about lawsuits that I heard you make. And I just want to kind of preface it with, back during Y2K, okay? I know a lot of people watching this, they might have not even been born yet. But a lot of us clearly knew the code was broken, okay? We knew there were problems. Now, yes, I do think some people went overboard on dealing, with maybe contingency plans and things like that. But the reason that it got so much attention was because the legal departments in these companies, they got the company's attention that, there could be massive outages, massive lawsuits following. And that's what got the funding behind, doing remediation and all those kind of things. But I want to hear your thoughts further on just, the idea that we might see lawsuits out of AI doing things that we never expected and no one ever thought to look at or catch or anything like that.
Absolutely. And, just because AI is probabilistic and you never know what the expectations are and what the expected results are, it becomes very difficult to test it to the level that you will be, fully satisfied. You will never be fully satisfied. That's the problem. AI will always hallucinate. That's the interesting point. I mean, it might hallucinate a little less, right? What's the percentage of hallucination, right? So we need to see that percentage as small as possible, right? But we always will see it. It will always be there, right? So, and that will lead to situations, and same goes for the bias, right? I mean, there will be there. At some point, it will be a huge, and some point it will be very, very small. But I truly believe because it's not easy to test AI, and nowadays nobody wants to spend money for quality, and many departments are getting erased, and many managers and directors getting wiped out from the companies and organizations. I feel that with AI, we will see a disaster, because if that will be a continuation, how decision makers now, thinking not very serious about quality for the deterministic applications, right? And they can get away with it because, there's not major lawsuits yet. And the reason being there is because people still invest in security. Security penetration testing, it's a regular, happening, especially in regulated environments. So they spend money, they have budgets for that, but they don't have budgets for functional testing, compatibility testing, usability testing, even performance testing they don't have, because they're not afraid. They're only afraid for compliance and security. And the same goes now with AI, where until somebody will get sued for serious money, and we will see that when more and more applications will hit the market, right? Then people will start getting very, very serious and realize that actually testing AI is much more complex and also not exactly the same as testing a typical application. So we need specialized testers for this if we don't want to get, sued, or if we don't want to, our reputation damaged, completely after we go live and push something into production. So I feel our industry can get better on its feet a little bit after some time, because there's not enough AI implementations yet hit production. That's the thing. But it will hit soon. Sooner or later, it's going to hit, because every single company, every single bank now implementing some levels of AI within their platforms. If you're not implementing AI now, your application's considered to be last century, right? Nobody is attractive to it, right? It's not cool if you don't have AI right now, right? So when people will start implementing more and more of this, there will be a lot of problems, a lot of issues, and potentially penalties for that. And that will trigger where people will say, I don't want lawsuits, I don't need this. Let's take a serious approach towards quality again. And let's make sure that we're not compromising quality. Let's invest in quality again. That's my personal feel. And this is why I still have a hope that our QA industry will heal, and we'll get back to where it was maybe 10 years ago or 15 years ago, right? That's sort of my prediction, and at the same time, my hope. Only time will tell, but that's how I want things to be. Whether it will be, I don't know. The time will tell.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I tell you, I think as quickly as things are moving, I I don't think we're going to have to wait around too long for anything in terms of maybe seeing maybe very public failures or those kind of things, because people are starting more and more to give autonomous control to AI, and that's a risk amongst itself. One other little tidbit in the news that I caught was two things with Anthropic happened. Their code got leaked. And they're saying that they're quick to say that it wasn't the tool; it was a human error that did it. But bottom line is, they have had two code leaks now in like the past 2 weeks, significant code leaks, and of course that means the hackers have them now, and the attackers have all that now. But just the idea that there are so many AI tools. I just picked Anthropic because they were in the news, but so many AI tools out there, and people so accepting just to pick one up and start using it, and without any thought to what they're giving it to the learning model. People are losing content out there. I mean, I'm almost kind of anticipating some kind of revolt from just the average person. That they want real. Okay, they want authentic. They want real music. They want real writing. They don't want things that are AI generated. And I'm waiting to see that pushback. I called it a rebellion before, but that pushback. And I don't know. I don't know. I have a feeling that we're just going really fast. One other observation that I've noticed here is that I've listened to a lot of things, read a lot of things by people who have been in the AI space for like 30 years, okay? These are people in the ground level of it, and I haven't seen an exception to this, that all those people are very concerned, okay? All those people think, somebody needs to be tapping the brake a little bit on this. We need to be exercising some due caution. And I think when you take it into the medical fields and the other safety critical kind of fields, I think we're going to have to get serious. One thing I want to mention too, just real quick before I get kind of your closing thoughts on some of this. I saw an amazing video. I'll put the link in the show notes. Mike Rowe, I think, has an amazing podcast. He's a very insightful guy. He's really emphasizing the trades. For example, for young people that are, just getting into the career field, which in one way, I think is a little bit sad because, used to be IT and coding. That was one of the bright spots, right? Mm-hmm. But anyway, he had this amazing interview with a guy, Jeff Childers, and they kind of edited just the part about AI in there. I'm going to put down in the notes. It's fascinating. It's not very long, but just this idea that one day, and it may not be that long, where your music playlist will be music that you design yourself. It won't be by a major artist. It will be music that you tell AI to create for you. In fact, I did it the other night with 11 Labs. I had a little poem that I wrote. I said, I wonder what this would sound like written to music or put to music, and it did a beautiful job. But it wasn't by a real songwriter, a human. And it just. And same thing with movies. You want a movie? Tell me what you want to see, and I'll make a movie about it. It's kind of scary times, isn't it?
It's very funny that you mentioned about the music, because believe it or not, I fall in love in building and creating music myself. So I just recently wrote a song with the help of AI, obviously, and the video also I made it with the help of AI, which emphasize the sad situation about QA and basically boost motivation for people out there who are, lost the job and searching for the job, not to give up. So that was purely made by AI, and I will also send you a link. And actually, I did this myself, and I was surprised what AI capabilities are. Obviously, it's hallucinated multiple times. I had to redo a lot of things. Right, but here we go, human in the loop. So you're absolutely correct. We're moving very quickly. We're moving very fast. We have to, know where the brakes are, because this machine can crash. And another point which I wanted to mention is that at some point, again, my prediction is that there got to be some regulated body of AI. There got to be some controls. It's got to be some also standards to say, look, you cannot throw things out there without a proper testing, right? If that will be achieved, if somebody will come up with this, I believe then people will get serious, and then testing will be, again, very, very important element of that software development life cycle prior launching anything or pushing anything to production. And that can also trigger some more respect for what we do for testing. So, but at some point of time, they gotta be a regulated body because there's just too many risks out there with AI, and somebody needs to control it the proper way, right? Otherwise, we can crash, and it can have some very big consequences.
Yeah, yeah. That's a good point. It kind of concerns me that back during Y2K, something I really learned was that two groups of people who really don't know much are politicians and news commentators, news people, and sometimes I wonder about leaving that kind of thing up to some of the politicians because man, they just do what their lobbyists kind of tell them to do.
All
But
right.
hey, I want to have you talk about one other thing real quick. So
Sure.
in Hist, I understand that you're working or you've got a certification for it. Is that out yet? I mean, is that a thing yet?
Not yet. We're still prepping the class. It will be e-learning course. And as I mentioned before, when I started Hist last year, I said it's going to be free. It's going to be specifically for our community. We're not going to charge any money for it, and we want to give this, to everybody to start leveraging, to start using it, because that's the discipline approach. That's the approach which we leveraged for many, many years, and it brought results. It brought success to our customers, to our clients. And that's the reason we wanted to package all of this and put it out there. Whoever wants to use it, it's free of charge.
Wow.
It's out there. You don't want to use it. You think you can do it without it. Perfect. We're not dictating that this is the only approach, please, but this is something which we want to give to the community. And we feel that the more people will at least go through this, which is totally free, will be e-learning format. They can get certification. They can put something on their resume. Obviously, we're not the ISTQB body, right? We're not competing with them, and we're not making money from the certifications as well. It's free. It's just giving to, provide that, experience to everybody out there to start thinking a little bit differently about the quality and about the role they playing. Because I see some testers or many testers playing a wrong role, and that's causing us to lose that momentum, that heat which we had before, and somehow getting downgraded, across the board. So I want to stop this somehow. By myself, I cannot do that. So that will require, again, everybody start thinking a little bit differently, and maybe that will trigger and fight back to injustice, to what's happening in our industry, where a lot of people are struggling, and QA is, it's nice to have. It's no longer mandatory or must to have. And
Yeah.
I want to try to fix that if I can, for whatever years left from my career, and we're not getting younger, right? So I want to still
That is
see
true.
things get better.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Ruslan, thank you so much for being with us today. I appreciate it. I think your comments, if they are heeded, will add a lot of value to our audience and how they approach testing, and hopefully to management who may be watching this podcast as well. Just your insights on the industry and kind of where we're at. So thanks for being with us. And thank you as an audience for watching. This is kind of a longer form podcast than I normally do, but I think it's got a lot of value to it. And so thanks for being here, and we will join you in the next episode upcoming. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much again. Thank you for inviting, and thank you for everything what you do for the community. And, this is extremely important, sharing knowledge, inviting, various of different experts in QA and sharing knowledge. I mean, a lot of people should listen. I'm not talking about listening to me, just in general, a lot of interesting topics which you're covering. It's a learning. We're talking about upgrading skills. This is your MBA. This is what, you can get out of, many years of experience, mistakes, success stories as well. So those types of show I really like, and that's why I am attending. And it was extremely interesting discussions with a lot of great questions and interesting topics which you wanted to cover today. So thank you for inviting again.
Well, thank you, Ruslan. We'll talk with you later. Thank you. And thanks everyone for watching.
Thanks.